Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar.
And I'm Yuksen.
We are the chroniclers of all that was and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires. Yet this month, we'll be going fast, because we will be discussing the White Scars.
Indeed, we will be getting back to our usual 1 month program. And this month, we will discuss speed, as well as some notable characters and the Great Khan himself. And let's not forget the Q&A at the end of the month when we answer your questions.
That's right. But before we start, if you like our stuff, feel free to follow, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really like our boxes, feel free to join our membership program, like Sir Bender Byton, our very first member.
Quite right, brother. And thank you to our other 2 members, Hermes Skirky and Anarchy 138. Well, Zeckthar, what are we going to be talking about this week?
Well, this week, Yuksen, we have come to the end of our topic of the White Scars, which means our usual monthly Q&A.
Cool deal. But first, we have some exciting news.
Quite right, Yuksen. So Yuksen and I have been doing this for a little longer than a year. And this week, thanks to you fine listeners on YouTube, we have reached 1,000 subscribers.
Yes, and we just want to say thank you. It is truly touching to know that people out there really enjoy our content.
And this gives us the opportunity to actually make some coin and perhaps fix Bob. Remember Bob, right, Yuksen?
Right. I honestly thought you had forgotten about Bob. Yet, unfortunately, that does mean on our YouTube channel there will be ads.
That is true. But we have a few things we wanted to tell you about that. So obviously, there will be an ad before the video starts and at the end. But there will be a few ads in the middle.
Correct. On our short boxes, there will be one right after the intro. And for our longer ones, there will be one after the intro. And then, if it's under an hour, one more. If it's over an hour and 15, there will be 2.
Indeed. But for those of you who sign up as members, there will be no ads. We figured if you are part of the membership program, you shouldn't have to live with ads. It seems almost like double dipping. But enough of the formalities. Yuksen, what is our first question?
Well, the first question is from Commander Purple YT. And he asks, hello, guys. I was wondering if you think what could stand up to all of the orcs uniting under Gaz. So, in my opinion, anyways, if they're all gathered together under one banner as one unity, as one actual unit, not constantly conflicting, they'd be pretty close, if not unstoppable at that point.
Well, I know that's the way you think, Yuksen. But if we're going to go, okay, well, first off, if they all united under one banner, you know it would kill the orcs. The orcs. Because it would only be a matter of time before infighting they'd just end up destroying each other. That's orcs. That's what they do.
Right.
But if we're going to talk about make-believe stuff like they all combine under one nation, then you have to be able to do the same thing with all the other military groups, right?
Okay, yeah.
So we're playing make-believe here. So if that's the case, I think we can both agree anyways that the Tau will no longer exist. They're just gone. Yeah. They will be just a blip in history. That's it. If all the orcs united said we're going to kill the Tau.
If the orcs ended up winning, it wouldn't matter anyways because they probably would, they don't really keep records or anything.
So the only 3 things that I can think of is, and like I said, this is hypothetical. If the Tyranid Hive fleet or the Hive Mother showed up with all the Tyranids, I think that would be a pretty good matchup. But as you, Yuksen has mentioned,
by the way that they've alluded to it, anyways.
Yes, the Hive Mother, anyways, is kind of, it's almost hypothetical. There's this thought process that it's there, and it's been eating other solar systems, and it's making its way to the Milky Way system. So if it does show up anyways, and it's as big as we think it is, especially because we're seeing splinter fleets of it right now with Behemoth and all these other ones, then yeah, it's going to be the monster of all Tyranids. And I could see that being a problem for the orcs if they all banded together. The other two that I could think of is if the Empire of Man, if everybody decided to stop fighting the Empire so they could all mass together into one unit and they could all meet up anyways in one segment. I think that would be pretty interesting, first off. And secondly, I don't know who's winning that one. That's honestly what would end up happening is that I think they would just bludgeon each other almost to death, and then chaos would just show up and ruin everything or something along those lines and just take out both of them.
Well, the problem is the longer that the fight would go on, the worse it would be for the Imperium because, the whole whenever an orc dies, they leave spores and stuff. And
until they start doing exterminatuses. I mean, like I said, I think that one would be fairly interesting. And I do agree with you, though. I do think that eventually the orcs would get the upper hand on that one because there's just so many of them. And they can reproduce fairly quickly.
And even more they don't have issues when it comes to ammunition either.
But this all has to do with the concept, though, if the orcs actually all fought together instead of against each other as well. So,
right.
Like I said, this is all hypothetical. And then the last one would be if all the Necrons all woke up at the same time. And they
fully
all
functional and actually operating correctly.
All functional, all ready to go. And they all banded behind the Silent King.
Which, like most things, probably won't ever happen.
It's about as much as this is happening as all the orcs uniting under Gazgul. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, and that one, anyways, I see a significant difference because they've got one of those weapons that literally just eliminates orcs. Because remember, their Gauze weapons literally kill DNA. So there is no poof, they come back. It's little as more fungus. They're just gone. So that would be fairly interesting. But yeah, those are the only kind of couple options. I mean, we also kind of talked about maybe the demons, if the demons were able to pop up, because you technically can't kill demons in the material world. That would be kind of interesting. I mean, chaos in and of itself, chaos in and of itself is always a wild card. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about chaos if they might be able to tackle the orcs?
I don't know if they start. Part of that ties in with what would Gork and Mork end up doing at that point.
Right. Which leads us actually to our second question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the tie-in, by the way, Yuksen. That was fairly well done. But Hermes Skirty asks, do orcs need warp juice in order to achieve a warg? And how do the orcs affect the warp? So to answer the first part of that question, no. They don't need anything from the warp. It's just orcs getting together, more and more of them. They just build energy around them. Now, Yuksen and I kind of differ a little bit on this, and it's really actually has all to do with just semantics. But do the orcs get energy from the wog? Technically, or not from the wog, the warp. Technically, they do.
Get it from the wog.
Of course, they get it from the wog. Yes, but no. Do they get it from the warp? Technically, they do, but it's not they do not get it. It's not really considered warp energy. It's wog energy because it's coming from Gork and Mork, who live in the warp. So it's not that they're actually feeding from the powers of chaos or the Immaterium. They're really just feeding it from Gork and Mork. But at the same time, the interesting thing is and we were actually just talking about this, Yuksen and I. And the interesting part about it is that the power kind of is very circular. Right?
Yeah, because the more that the orcs do and interact and fight and whatever, they're generating more energy that basically feeds Gork and Mork, which ironically is where they get their unknowingly psychic powers.
Yes. So they're literally feeding Gork and Mork, and in and of itself, Gork and Mork are feeding the orcs. So it's fairly circular, and which I find fairly interesting. But if you want to know how they actually affect the warp, how they actually affect the warp, the Immaterium, That's kind of interesting. So I actually did a box on this, kind of. And it was the last time Horus Lupercal and the Emperor fought side by side. And they were fighting one mean orc, pretty much. He was a beast. And one of the things that it's mentioned about it, just to give you an idea of this orc, anyways, he's literally strangling the life out of the Emperor. He's kind of saying something. But one of the reasons why that was even possible was because all these orcs with all this wog energy kind of was suffocating the Emperor's ability to use his psychic abilities. So if you're asking how the wog energy works with the Materium, it seems to be kind of a dampener from what I've seen
If we discard what that crap thing when it came to the War of the Beast, that's still
What do you mean?
stupid. The whole reverse psychic, whatever, which doesn't make sense anyways, even if they were psychic.
Okay, so with the War of the Beast,
way that they
right,
killed the beast.
Yeah, wasn't that though they were using blanks, right?
They were using a Sister of Silence to somehow
Right.
psychically backlash or something like that and cause all their heads to explode. It made no sense to me.
Well, it was almost like using their own technology against them was the concept, right?
Which, yeah, it still didn't
which
make sense logically, but
still
I
means
mean,
that we have a
Warhammer 40K logically.
Well, let me put it this way. It really just honestly means anyways that WOG energy is just in and of itself anyways significantly different than a lot of the stuff anyways that we've talked about. It's, I mean, even lore wise, it's very mystical would probably be a good way of describing it. I mean, the fact that you can use WOG energy to make a stick a gun is just, I mean, it's supposed to be kind of comical and powerful at the same time.
Kind of like, I think one of my favorite WA abilities the Weird Boy uses called the Crunch. And basically using their power, a giant green foot randomly stomps down on the battlefield.
Well, and that also brings up that ending point anyways, how I kind of said that the WOG energy is a dampener. Maybe it's not necessarily really a dampener on the warp energy, but it's more along the lines that all these orcs are together and they think anyways, nothing can stop us. And therefore that in and of itself anyways dampens everything around them because their energy is actually clashing with warp energy. Kind of an interesting thought, right. But thank you too for sending us
it's all run on their imagination, so
pretty much, yeah. But thank you too for sending in questions, and for those of you who have questions about Warhammer 40K, we will answer them at the end of next month. Just leave them in the comments, and we will try to do our best to answer them. But it seems we have a little bit more time, so I figured anyways that we would throw in that one character we couldn't last week, and then the story that we had. But I know Yuksen, you wanted to tell us a little bit about the culture of the White Scars, yes?
Well, I figure I should do a very quick history lesson on the 5th Legion.
Okay. Why? I mean, we kind of already discussed anyways the origins of Jagatai Khan.
Yes, just saying Jagatai became the Primarch and then move on doesn't really give the whole picture on the White Scars, does it? I mean, you need to add flavor to these things. Explain how they became unified and why they do certain rituals.
You know, if I didn't know any better, Yuksen, you're starting to sound like me.
Well, we need to start from even before they found Jagatai, when the 5th Legion was known as the Star Hunters.
Cool name.
They first saw action during the Unification Wars on Terra, held apart from their brothers and rarely found in massed armies. Recruits were primarily drawn from the ice wastes of the Thulian Basin. They were nonetheless one of the first legions to see action in the name of the Emperor, fighting alongside the older Thunder Warriors. The early 5th Legion was given the solitary duty of seeking out the hidden lairs of many demigods and warlords that ruled Terra. Their superhuman physiology allowed them to survive in the most radiation-contaminated areas of the planet and operate deep in enemy territory to scout and harass. In these early days, The legion numbered only a few hundred warriors and frequently weakened the enemy in preparation for the arrival of the emperor's main armies. However, the Star Hunters, as they eventually became known as, were noted as being free-spirited and tending to ignore orders given to them by anyone other than the emperor himself. They operated without glory, far from the center of conflict. Their famous early battles, such as the raid of the Albion fortress of Dubris or the 83-day battle in the catacombs of Kadira against Ursh forces, went largely unrecorded. Few within the Star Hunters showed any outrage at this slight, and they even took a quiet pride in their silent role. Nonetheless, they were further isolated from their peers and became known as Terra's Forgotten Sons. As the Unification War spiraled into the Great Crusade, the Star Hunters were among the first Astartes to depart the Sol system. They were split into 100 companies and acted as pioneers, charting and seeking out domains for the Crusade's expeditionary fleets. Once again, these expeditions received little attention or praise, and found the Star Hunters as the outsiders. Nonetheless, one such pioneer company discovered Chthoniya, homeworld of Horus, and this cemented a bond with the Primarch for years to come. Their earlier experience in pioneering and scouting also saw the Star Hunters master the art of hit and run and maneuver warfare that would come to define them in the future. Soon enough, the Star Hunters were known not only as pioneers, but also as raiders who struck swiftly and without warning, drawing out a foe and testing it before broadcasting the data to the Allied expeditionary fleets. In these early days, the Star Hunters lived by a single creed: each new day is a victory. This motto arose due to the Legion sustaining heavy losses and slowly but surely eroding under the pressure of its duties. Rather than ask for aid, they chose to instead live and die in the manner and locations of their choice. It was at this near breaking point that their Primarch Jagatai Khan was discovered after 50 long years of searching. After joining the Imperium, the Khan found himself as lord of a legion of vagabonds spread out across the galaxy, a situation that might have sat less well with others of his brethren, but was a challenge well suited to the great Khan's talents. Just as he had on the vast plains of Chagoris, the great Khan sought to build a conquering army from insular nomadic bands, and he began in the same fashion. Recruiting from among those of his Chagorian comrades that were of an age to undergo the arduous transformative surgery and be reborn as Space Marines, the Great Khan formed a new corps of warriors for his legion. At the same time, he dispatched a grand summons, calling upon all of the disparate bands of the Fifth Legion, the scattered pioneer companies that warred across the galaxy, to attend him. It took 10 years, and in 875.M30, the Khan finally mustered all of the remaining pioneer companies on Chagoris and declared that they would be unified in a shared tradition and ritual. In an event known as the Blooding, 50,000 warriors took up knives and marked themselves with a scar and a new Chagorian name. Among these new traditions was the study of noble pursuits such as calligraphy, hunting, and reciting oral tales. However, this blend of primitive and enlightened traditions put him at odds with some aspects of the imperial truth and brought him into conflict with primarchs such as Gilliman and Lorgar.
Oh, wait. Lorgar? Didn't Lorgar also have problems with the imperial truth? Isn't that how the
He
whole Horus
also had
heresy got
problems
started?
with anybody not worshiping the emperor too.
Yeah, but you just said he had a problem with him not following the imperial truth. I don't know, man. That's a little weird that Lorgar would have a problem with it. Maybe he was just trying to hide his own aspects of not following the imperial truth. I can see Gilliman. That makes sense.
Maybe he was hiding his at odds of Jigtai Khan doing something other than what he felt should be done by saying, "Oh,
Right.
it doesn't align with the imperial truth."
Yeah.
But really, what's his mind
That
is,
doesn't align with
that
the
isn't
imperial.
following worshiping the emperor.
That doesn't follow the imperial culture. I mean, truth, right?
Yeah.
Truth.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Along with this, he decided that baptism by fire would be necessary in the unification of his legion. As such, he chose the feral and hellish worlds of the Kolarn Circle for his initiation campaign. It was there that he set his legion against enemies that could not be overcome by any one company alone. Only by working as one legion would they prevail. He dispersed the Keshig he had raised from Chagoris, the core of his new White Scars, throughout the various companies. Warriors whose names would only grow with the passing of the years. King Ja, Targutai Yesuge, Hasek Neon Khan, and others besides. These warriors he trusted to spread his teaching and to lead by example, to stand as his champions among the 5th Legion as it went to war in his name. Of the 80,000 warriors that they led into the fighting, 1 in 10 would perish in the 5 Terran years of struggle to cleanse the circle. A baptism of fire and blood that sealed the bonds between the survivors, stronger than any simple oath. The orcish hordes of Singer Mar and Vorgeist were cut to pieces in a series of hit-and-run campaigns that bore the telltale hallmarks of the Chagorian Plains tribes' tactics. In every battle in which he fought, Jagatai led the assault. At first, the legion simply followed him into the maelstrom, but as tales of the Primarch's wild valor and consummate skill spread amongst the warriors of the 5th, they soon began to compete to fight by his side. It was his example that stood as the banner throughout the conflict. It was to the Kagan and each other whom they were bound, not to the distant dream of the Imperium or any of its worlds, but only to the Khan of Khans and the savage joy he took in war and in life. In those turbulent times, such things were considered of little note, for none would countenance the idea that a Primarch sworn to the Emperor would or could ever forsake his vows, and, as such, absolute loyalty to the Khan was considered the same as absolute loyalty to the Imperium. With the final battle for Kolarn Circle fought and won upon the desolate ash fields of Kolarn itself, the many inhabited worlds fell into the Great Khan's hands. Those worlds had served to bind his legion together in blood and war, and now they would serve to rebuild it from the wide plains of Chagoris, the rugged wastes of Kolorn, and the old Earth's many recruitment camps. The Kagan replenished the ranks of the Legion, and the White Scars emerged from the Kolorn Circle campaign, a Legion reborn. So, brother, what do you think of the methods the Khan used to turn the White Scars into a unified Legion?
Well, first, I actually do have a question, and then I had kind of a couple interesting anecdotes. But they're known as the Laughing Killers. Why are they known as the Laughing Killers? I figured you would have covered that in your culture aspect.
Well, I feel it comes into the fact that they have this, just like Jagatai, this sort of joy in war and in life, and in both concepts, as in basically war is life. Let's enjoy it, not to a chaos standpoint, but
Which brings me back to something interesting that you mentioned is that the White Scars were truly and wholly loyal to Jagatai.
yeah,
Which to me anyways is fairly interesting, because if you talk if the scribes are chronicling this anyways, they say that is one of the problems that was of Horus Lupercal, is that his Luna Wolves were devout and loyal to him. So why is it okay with one guy and not okay with the other? Honestly, I think it's fairly simple, but what do you think?
The Khan embodied and basically puts out this viewpoint of honor above everything else. Vows should be taken absolute. And having seen it again and again and again and again and again, it would put into the mindset of his followers would be, well, this is how all Primarchs should be then. It should be absolute.
Right, but let's say Jagatai Khan decided to actually go with Horus. His whole legion would go with him, correct?
Yeah.
So I think, honestly, anyways, the simple answer is because Jagatai stayed with the Emperor and Horus didn't.
Yeah. Well,
I think,
originally,
honestly, that's really the big thing that separates them in history, why it was okay for Jagatai and it wasn't okay for Horus. It's like, well, because Horus betrayed the Emperor. Jagatai didn't. It's that
that
simple.
plus it's very evident when where none of them decided they were going to fall away from Jagatai while Jagatai was there, but when he was on actually Prospero,
Mm-hmm.
that's when some of them went, well, maybe we should,
Follow Horus.
Yeah. And mind you, oddly enough, those mainly Terran.
Right.
You would have guessed that.
Well, it makes sense. Because they weren't brought in specifically, anyways, by Jagatai.
And as
And they
mentioned
knew Horus.
earlier, is the fact that because they had a much greater bonds than the Chagorians did with Horus.
It does always kind of make me wonder if the first guy who happened to actually talk with Jagatai was Horus, if this would have drastically changed things. Because remember, Horus really actually wanted to sit down and talk to Jagatai. He wanted to see if he could turn him because he thought he could. But before that happened, he gets attacked by the Alpha Legion. He runs into Magnus. He runs into Mortarion, all of which, anyways, he ends up fighting duels with. At that point, anyways, Horus doesn't have much of a leg to stand on.
Well, even if he approached them, I think that he would still be turned down.
Why?
Because of the fact that Jagatai, throughout this entire thing, has a absolute loyalty to what he vows. In this case, it would be the vow that he gave to the Emperor.
So yeah, but the whole vow that he gave to the Emperor was provided that the Emperor kept up his end of the deal. Remember, he bargained with him.
Which at the point that Horus would have approached him would have still been, in effect. It isn't like when the Emperor plucked Angron, where he went, "Bah, we'll just nuke the place."
Yes, but you don't think that Horus, anyways, was smart enough to actually know that and would have been like, well, he's already broken his vows to you. You should do the same thing.
Except for he would have to prove the fact that he had.
I think Horus could. Horus was smart enough. I think he might have been able to do that. But this is all conjecture at this point. I just find it fairly interesting because, and I think, a lot of people are always just kind of like, oh, Jagatai would never side with Horus. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at it, he really only had like two friends, Horus and Magnus.
Right.
And even anyways, when he discusses anyways with the shard of Magnus at Prospero, there is this deep friendship still that is there. I mean, at the end of it anyways, when Magnus's shard shatters into 1,000 pieces, he stands there for a second and then bows deeply in respect. I mean, the man didn't have a whole lot of friends. They just both happen to be traitors.
Of course, being addressed the way that he would have been, it would also be, and this is something that's also been brought up, is the fact that he'd look at both sides, they go, yeah, I don't like the Emperor, but at the same time, I can see what you're coming with, and it's a whole lot worse.
Yeah, I believe he said, how did he say it? He said, the Emperor is a tyrant, but Horus is corrupt. I think it was something along those lines.
Yeah, so
he was talking to Magnus. So, yes, I still find that actually that whole thing, if Horus could actually have talked to him first, I really wonder anyways what would have happened. I think it would have been a very interesting conversation. And I think, to me anyways, it would have been more of, as opposed to what ended up happening where he really did just side with the Emperor. I think you're looking at more like a toss of a coin, which to me anyways is fairly interesting. But regardless, the White Scars are, I know we there is a deep barbarism to them, but Jagatai kind of brought with that anyway some more noble aspects that really drastically changed how the White Scars worked.
Right.
And beforehand, they were kind of these wild buccaneers that, I mean, they were pioneers. I would call them more buccaneers that kind of ran raids across the entire solar system, and they were very good at it. And then Jagatai showed up, and he goes, yeah, I'm kind of impressed with this, but you guys have no organization. We need to instill this into you. And he did.
If anything, I do believe, and I believe I mentioned this earlier, he was the perfect Primarch.
Yes, for this.
The perfect one. Because it's like, oh, no bets. I mean, kind of like what I did before.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but one of the things I like about it is that he understood that they needed organization. But instead of, like, for instance, if Rogel Dorn took over the Starkeepers,
he'd beat them.
He would have beat them into submission and regimented them into, phalanxes. Jagatai looked at this and he said, I'm going to use their abilities and their love of the raid, the love of the hunt. And I'm going to combine that anyways with the organization that I've used before. And we're going to turn them into this great hunter unit that conquers worlds. And that's what he did. And it was fairly impressive.
I also like the fact that he brought about not only his culture, but he basically, because of the fact that they had to do these oral recites of tales and things, they actually had to also learn the Chagorian language.
Well, not only that, but also the history.
Yeah.
With history becomes understanding. If you don't have history, then you have no understanding of who you are, where you come from.
Which is why, for example, I feel they wouldn't have been nearly effective if he just did this baptism by fire, because it's like, yeah, they're strong together, but they don't have this sense of like we're actually unified on so many levels.
It's kind of like a good example of this would be Terran 42 immigrants that come into the United States. They're required to learn U.S. history, and a lot of people are like, well, why? I didn't have to learn that. It's like, well, first off, you did if you went to elementary school. But secondly, it's because it gives a history of the place that you're going to. It gives you roots. It gives you a concept, anyways, of why this place is the way it is. It's the same, anyways, with what Jagatai did. He's giving them an understanding, anyways, of why he's in charge. And on top of that, anyways, giving them a history.
Right.
Both of which, anyways, are very important. But he didn't. The thing, though, that I do like about it, though, is he didn't take away their Buccaneers aspect. He used it.
Right.
Which, to me, anyways, is great. That's what a great military leader does. Instead of just trying to reform something, understanding what they are, and then using that. To me, anyways, that's really good.
Especially when it falls it definitely fell in the wheelhouse of the Khan and how he did things.
Oh, yeah.
But, he's
like, I've already done this before. Let's do it again. But this time, anyways, with super soldiers. This will be awesome.
And bikes. By the way, what's a bike? That thing over there. Okay.
He just turns it on and you hear the revving, and all people behind him are just like, oh, this is much better than a horse. Anyways, we do have to move on. And the character we couldn't get to last week, I think we should discuss this week, Yuksen. What do you think?
Sure.
Well, the guy we were going to talk about last week was Sar Af. And Sar Af is actually, he's way past Jagatai Khan. This is, he was a person that was chronicled actually in the Sabbath Crusades. They took place at the beginning of 755.M41 and ended in 791.M41. The objective was to retake the Sabbath World sector located at the rimward edge of the Segmentum Pacificus from the heretical forces of chaos. Now, while most know little of this crusade other than its popular reading for historians because of one particular unit of Imperial Guard known as
the 10th First and Only, led by none other than Colonel Commissar Ibram Gaunt.
Yep, exactly. But while Gaunt's ghosts have taken most of the glory because they were documented so well by scholar Dan Abnett, little else is really recalled. Now, while I could recount many details that explain the bigger picture as to what the Sabbath Crusade was, I won't.
You mean this story has to do with the ghosts?
Indeed.
Fantastic. But I don't recall the White Scars being involved with the 10th First and Only, brother. So, where does our story fit in?
Well, it starts with Sar Af, a White Scar who, upon hearing about the hunter prowess of the Tanith, decided to check it out for himself and became a liaison to the regiment and challenged one Owen McCall to a friendly game of cat and mouse.
Well, if you wanted to be tested, that was the guy to do it. If I recall correctly, McCall snuck up on and killed a bloody mandrake of the Drukhari.
That is true, brother. I had forgotten about that. If I recall right, it was Scar Whale. A mandrake was one of the 9, yes?
Indeed. Great memory, brother.
Yes. Well, as you know, the gears keep spinning. Regardless, as Sar Af hunted his human prey, he eventually found McCall behind him with a gun to the back of his head. What follows next is too good to put into idle words. So here it is, chronicled by Dan Abnett in his short chronicling called Killbox. A game to me, he said. Sar Af lowered his bolt gun. The 10th ghosts, he said. They come with a good reputation, especially for covert actions. Good, by human standards. But you've proven something today. It has been an education, Sergeant. Taking this challenge with you. I would venture to say I have never met a human as cunning as you. I'll take that, sir, said McCall. I assumed you prepared, walked the ground. Chose your locations. Yes, Sar Af nodded. Wise and diligent, he said. The only way you could hope to even the odds. We of the Adeptus Astartes always prepare too. Prepare for the worst. We prepare for an enemy to be better than us, to have some edge, and adjust accordingly. That is why the Adeptus Astartes always win. McCall allowed himself a small smile. Except this time, sir, he suggested. Replied Sar Af, as though amused by something. McCall felt a chill creep up his spine. His attention had been fixed on the White Scar. He realized there was something behind him. He turned. Hollow Furnace of the Iron Snakes stood in the doorway, his bolt gun trained at McCall. Edwin of the Silver Guard, weapon ready and fixed, slowly emerged from the cover of a lateral hatch. All 3 Space Marines had their weapons on. McCall slowly lowered his aim. I asked my battle brothers to shadow us as we played our game, said Sar Af. Is that really sporting? Asked McCall. A fair contest. Edwin snorted. Not at all, Sergeant, said Sar Af. But when is war ever sporting? This contest is never fair to begin with. War is about victory. That is all that matters. And that is why the Adeptus Astartes prevail. When the odds stack against us, we revise the rules and change the odds. McCall shrugged. He dropped down from the pipework onto the deck in front of the towering Sar Af. Well then, sir, I will admit defeat. I'll cherish the fact that according to the original rules of this contest, I bested ye. Me, a lone human. But I will concede that I don't stand a chance against all 3 of you. If this had been real, you would have ended me.
You did well, McCall,
said Hollow Furnace.
Savor the fact that you got the drop on our finest hunter.
McCall nodded. Except that I did more than that. He looked down at the deck beneath him. The 3 Space Marines slowly looked down too. I knew from the start I didn't really stand a chance against Brother Sar Af. Not a chance in hell, even if I outstealthed him and lured him into a kill box. So I set a trap, just to be sure. And look at that, my trap caught 3 Space Marines. The deck of the machine shop was rigged. The 3 Space Marines could see the soft packs of explosives wedged under the deck plates they were standing on. The detonators wired to set. Boom, said McCall. Edwin and Hollow Furnace stared at McCall in disbelief.
But if you triggered this trap, you will perish with us,
said Edwin. Of course I will, said McCall casually. But that's why the poor bloody guard always wins. We're expendable. One trooper for 3 overpowered post-human adversaries? Well, that's a victory. There was a moment of silence, and then Sar Af began to laugh. It was loud, long, and delighted laugh. Well played, Sergeant, he said. He has us, brothers. He has us cold. Holofernes hissed a curse. Edwin nodded, his face grim.
I won't concede stalemate.
Oh, thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to test myself against such fine gentlemen as you. He knelt down and began to rip the packets of explosives from the edges of the deck plate.
Thrown!
Exclaimed Holofernes.
Be careful with those.
These? Said McCall, holding up one of the packs. They're just bags of powdered caffeine mix. Sar Af began to laugh all over again. That's the other thing about the guard, said McCall. We bluff like bastards, too. Well, brother, what do you think of this unusual tale? Okay, before you give your opinion, I must state anyways, I appreciate the comedy in this because they're all just, this is just a test, right?
Right.
And the fact, anyways, that McCall is smart enough to actually outwit 3 Space Marines is pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, by this time, this is something for people who haven't read the books. This is after he had spent a significant amount of time on a chaos-held world where he had to constantly be vigilant and not get caught by not just random chaos people, but also chaos Space Marines. And
I think we covered that when we said that he snuck up on a mandrake. Mandrake. The things that are supposed to be literally shadows themselves. He snuck up on a shadow.
Yeah.
That's kind of shows you how sneaky he is. And okay, how does it describe? I think you read these books more recently than I did, I think. But when they talk about McCall, he is truly a ghost.
There is only one other one that they mentioned that even he considered was better than him, and his name was McVenner.
Yeah.
And later on, when he comes back from that chaos-held world, there's a group of scouts that they just, every single time that they'd look away and then look back, he wouldn't be there anymore. He'd be somewhere else completely that they wouldn't have even seen him move at all. Because he was that stealthy.
The concept of stealth, anyways, I think we also established it just in this story. The fact that he could actually sneak up on Sar Af. I mean, most people don't think of Space Marines as sneaky. There are kind of 2 of them, though, that are, or three legions, anyways, that are chapters that are known to be fairly sneaky. One, ironically, is the White Scars, because they're hunters. We've talked about that for the last 4 months or 4 weeks. But and to me, anyways, I think it's kind of laughable that they're considered sneaky, but they wear white armor. Sorry, the point. Anyways, yeah, the other one's Raven Guard, and then you've also got Dark Angels. They're both also known to be very sneaky. But the fact that he was able to sneak up on Sar Af and then get, and then end up winning in the end, to me, anyways, is just shocking.
Well, I will say one of the things that amazes me is how he is able to basically predict a way to actually get him into that machine shop. Because if he hadn't got him into that machine shop, he wouldn't have been able to have claimed the 3 Space Marines.
Right.
Because of the explosives that weren't explosives.
The other thing I like about this is that it kind of shows Sar Af's character. And Sar Af is kind of, from what I've read about him anyways, he is very much like the rest of the White Scars. So the concept of him, if it was an Ultramarine would be very indignant about this whole thing and try to explain how he actually beat McCall, or an Imperial Fist, or a Black Templar would probably have slapped McCall for his insolence because it's the Black Templar. Sar Af, on the other hand, anyways,
if the Black Templar the Black Templar wouldn't have even
deemed this a worthy experiment. Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. He would have been just like, you want me to do what?
You don't sneak around. Even though I wear black.
Because if it actually had happened, he probably would have just knocked over the building and just kept going. Because that's what they do.
Even though the Black Templar wear black, we aren't stealthy.
We're not stealthy at all. But Sar Af, at the end, anyways, he not only does he concede his defeat, but he actually finds great humor in this whole thing, that they actually lost. And to me, anyways, that kind of gives a whole lot of character to the White Scars.
Yeah.
This understanding of we can be beaten, you know, and then learning from it too. So to me, anyways, I love Sar Af's character in this, even more than McCall, who McCall is awesome. I love the way that he was written by scribe Dan Abnett, but Sar Af here, anyways, gives us kind of a inkling on how the White Scars really think. And to me, anyways, I find that very interesting. I mean, the fact that he finds amusement in things. When people talk about Space Marines, normally it's almost like they don't have a sense of humor, right?
The only ones that I can see where they do have some sort of even moderate sense of humor, it's, well, like in this case, you have Sar Af.
Right.
The other case is the Space Wolves. Those are the only two things I can think of.
And they have very dark humor.
And because, you know, the salamanders, which are the other ones I could think of right offhand that I've read a lot about, for them, it isn't really humor so much as they care.
Right. Which
doesn't
have anything to do with humor at all. But
caring.
They care about the people, you know, kind of thing. But that's not really humor. The only other one I can think of is there was a tech Marine that ended up becoming kind of friends with Cyphus Cain. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
What was the chapter?
Reclaimers. And
Reclaimers.
The tech's name was Drummond, I think, or Drummond. Drumon.
Ah. Well, the thing that I remember about him was it wasn't necessarily that he cracked jokes and he had like a sense of humor, but he understood humor. So when Cyphus Cain said something that was, you know, ironic or funny, every other Space Marine just kind of had this deadpan look on their face, except for this one tech Marine who just kind of had a sly smile. He's just in the back. He's like, I get it.
Yeah. There's
Which Cyphus Cain, by the way, was very thankful about, because he would like crack a joke and everybody there anyways is deadpan, except for the one guy in the back who's just kind of like, I get it. He's like, okay, thank God.
But he's explained as also having made like a couple of jokes that apparently other reclaimers was like, yeah, he has a peculiar sense of humor. Just ignore it.
The tech Marine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there, as you can see, anyways, we're talking about like very few and far between.
Yes.
You have Space Marines that have a sense of humor. I mean, they're not designed for it. They're designed for war. But we can see anyways that at least the White Scars, and we've already titled them anyway, they're known as the Laughing Killers. Now, I don't know if that's just simply a psychological effect anyways that they send on their enemies. It's like, what's that sound? And all of a sudden you just hear this booming laughter before they come in and just wreck you. Or if it's just someone gives a good joke before they charge. Did you hear the one about Alfred? No. You know, someone guy gives a punchline, you know. That after all day keeps the doctor away, especially when well thrown. And they go zipping down. It seems that the White Scars, as opposed to just about every other chapter other than, like you mentioned, the Space Wolves, have a sense of humor.
I think it's the way that their culture was brought up to begin with.
Yeah. And by the way, if we missed a few anyways, feel free to go ahead and leave those in the comments. We would love to hear about Space Marines with a sense of humor. They just normally don't have one. But speaking of Space Marines, could you actually bring up the Kasheg? Could you discuss the Kasheg and what they are?
Why, yes.
Cool.
The Kasheg were the fighting elite of the White Scars and personal bodyguards to Primarch Jagatai Khan during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Consisting of several squads of Terminators, many consisted of veterans who had fought alongside Jagatai on Chagorus. In addition to the main body of Legion Kesheg, the individual brotherhoods of the White Scars also possessed Keshig. To differentiate them from the main, these formations were known as Mingan Keshig, Mingan being the Korkin word for brotherhood. Yes, because
Okay, so like, slow down, have a second there, Yuksen. So the Legion Kesheg, are they the bodyguards of the Khan? And then these other ones are bodyguards of, or actually, they were the bodyguards of the Kagan, right? And then these other ones were bodyguards of Khans, aka the chapter captains, right?
Yeah, the
Okay.
brotherhoods.
I just want to make sure that we got that right. All right, sorry, carry on.
The Kagans Keshig were once described as a whole phalanx of giants in bone-white Terminator plate. This body of troops stood somewhere between a honor guard for the Kagan and an elite reserve intended to bolster both the fighting spirit and tactical firepower of line troops. Even now, the term Keshig is still used for the honor guard of the chapter master. Originally, the term referred to Jagatai's foremost warriors and advisors he had gained while conquering Chagorus. From these people, he chose those who would become what was later known as the White Scars, Keshig. During the current age, members of the Keshig are personally selected from amongst the chapter's finest warriors, and they serve as bodyguards, military advisors, and executors of the great Khan's orders. Every one of these champions has proved himself in battle 1,000 times over, and they protect their liege with total devotion. At the Kurultai, or gathering of all chapter brotherhoods, the Keshig's elaborately worked armor and weaponry stands out even amongst the masterwork war gear of the other chapter champions present. Amongst the Keshig of old, the most famous is King Ja.
Ah, yes. Kinja.
Yes.
Tell us about
And
Kinja.
he has an awesome suit of armor.
Oh, yes. For those on YouTube, anyways, they're going to see this picture, and it looks really cool.
If
He looks
you want to know what a Space Marine looks like in Terran 42 Oriental armor, this is it.
Pretty much. He looks like a Japanese demon in armor. It's sick. And it's not white either. It's red.
Yes.
But anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yes. King Ja was a member of the White Scars and master of the Keshig during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. A staunch loyalist of his Primarch Jagatai, King Ja fought alongside the Khan during their youth on Chagorus and was inducted into the Legion after Khan's rediscovery by the Emperor. As a Space Marine, he was frequently described by the Khan as one of the most formidable warriors of the Legion, having mastered the art of the hunt at a young age. When he took to the battlefield, he acted as a force of nature, with a fury and strength behind his aggression. That while apparently barbaric, was tempered with a keen intelligence and sense for the ebb and flow of battle. He was one of the few White Scars to actively prefer Terminator armor, which allowed him to wield the Tails of the Dragon, 2 Dao-styled power swords, with greater skill and power. Though loyal to Jagatai, he was known to question his decisions on numerous occasions and actively encouraged his Keshig to question him in the same manner to ensure that they never became followers blind in faith. 2 years into the Horus Heresy, King Ja battled against traitors at Parasamar, driving them out in a great victory. 4 years into the Horus Heresy, King Ja was part of a raid at Kalium, where he fought Eidolon of the Emperor's Children on the Kalium Gate, a massive space structure many times larger than a starfort guarding a strategic warp point. Before he was killed, he was rescued by Ravuel Arvida, using his warp powers and taken back to the Lance of Heaven to be treated. While deeply wounded, he spoke to Arvida through psychic means to express his fear that the Khan would blame himself for the failure. Arvida assured him that Ilya Ravalian offered the scars a path, and that the sacrifice would lead to victory before King Ja passed away. What is your opinion on the Kashig and King Ja?
So does Kinja actually die here?
Yes.
Oh,
Well,
that's too bad.
yeah.
By the way, the guy he
Passing away
fights,
generally is another term for dying.
well, no. I mean, before he passed away, but when you say passed away, that's normally like it sounded like he was getting healed, and then he passed away later. But that's why I was asking.
No,
But
he was deeply wounded enough that he wasn't gonna.
he was mortally wounded. Okay, I gotcha. By the way, Edelon, he ends up getting killed by
It's Eidolon, I believe.
Eidolon ended up getting killed by Fulgrim. So his own master. So there you go. If you want to know what happened to him. But anyways, the two other guys.
Okay, so one of them was Hasek Noyan Khan.
Right.
And he, as you can tell, became a Khan.
So a Khan cannot be part of the Kashig, correct?
No,
Right.
they can't. Hasek Noyan Khan was actually one of the Khans that tried to go pro-Horus.
Mhm.
But upon Jayatai's return to the Sword Storm, he kind of didn't get away with it.
Oh, do tell. What happened to him?
The Khan basically impaled him after, let's just say the confrontation went from words to blades, and very quickly was sort of obvious who was going to win that.
What happened to the rest of them?
They ended up surrendering, and then they became Magyar Mazan, which basically I think it means oath breakers.
Mm.
And so they were created they were turned into small squads and sent on basically suicide missions with no backup.
Very much like the kamikaze.
So it's basically you're atoning for your
Sins.
sins.
Mm-hmm.
And that shows you how much honor driven the White Scars are, though. The fact that they wouldn't go screw that and just try to flee.
Right. But then there's that third guy, though. Oh, what's his name?
Targutai Yasuge.
Yasuge. Yeah.
Yes, and
What happened to him?
He was actually ended up being the chief Stormseer.
Oh,
and for those who don't know what Stormseers are
librarians.
The psychers of the White Scars.
Right.
They aren't the same as librarians. It's kind of like how
they're more like Space Wolf.
They're more like rune priests.
Yeah.
Than they are like librarians.
I know they're not really librarians, but they function the same way, right?
Yeah, they're the psychers.
Right. Well, this has all actually been fairly interesting. We've got a little time left over here, and unfortunately, I was not enough time, anyways, to do the hunt for the Shattered Prince. But we do have time, anyways, for one last thoughts, anyways, on the White Scars. So before we take off, Yuksen, what are your thoughts on the White Scars?
I think they needed a different color scheme. Like the scar symbol being white, and the rest of it could be like black or gray or. But that's beside the point. Other than that, I really like the aspect of not only their great heritage and belief systems, and I really like their Primarch, one of my top Primarchs.
Jagatai, yeah.
Jagatai is, I think, if not my favorite, tied with Leman Russ and Alpharius and Omegon.
Yeah. I will say that a lot of people, anyways, the way they look at the White Scars is that kind of like you, anyways. Jagatai Khan is awesome. But then the White Scars is just kind of like, yeah, they were his legion. I think a lot of people think of it that way.
Yeah.
Personally, with us
I
actually,
think part of that has to do with the fact that the original chronicling of the White Scars didn't have Jagatai at the beginning really that much. More and more information came out about the Khan later in comparison to the White Scars that have kind of always been mentioned here and there throughout the histories. And because of that, their representation has pretty much always been, well, they're the guys on the bikes.
that's honestly, anyways, what most people think of when they think of White Scars.
Kind of like the Raven Wing, except for, unlike the Raven Wing, which are basically solely bikers.
The Raven Wing is like a subsection of the Raven Guard, but
no,
Dark Angels, right?
Dark Angels.
Dark Angels, yeah. They took the name anyways from the Raven Guard. But to me, anyways, I think the thing that like I said, I agree with you. I think a lot of people really love Jagatai Khan, but his legion is almost secondary. So it's like, it's the guys on the bikes.
Yeah.
But with our delving into it though, they're fairly interesting. They have their own and the only culture that I can think of anyways that is really, really strangely different is probably the Space Wolves. That is very inclusive to just themselves, or occlusive. That might be a word, but just the aspect that they are who they are because of their traditions and their aspects of this one place, Chagoris. I mean, the only other ones I can think of anyways that are even slightly resemble that, other than the Space Wolves, is probably
Salamanders.
Well, I was thinking salamanders, but at the same time, salamanders don't really have a huge culture anyways that derives from this. They come from a death planet, and they take Vulcan's words to heart where they look after each other and those around them, which is great.
Well, I think that's actually more cultural based, though.
I was thinking the only other one I can think of anyways is actually the Ultramarines. Very Roman. I mean, the concept behind it is very Roman society. But then again, that kind of bleeds into the rest of the Imperium. So it's almost like it's not that big of a deal because everybody else kind of thinks the same way. I can't really think of any other legion anyways from at least the original 18 that had their own kind of culture like the White Scars did and the Space Wolves did. I mean, can you think of one?
Like I said, the only thing that I can really think of is how the salamanders, and I believe it is more based around their culture because of where they actually grew up, but also their culture of family over anything else. And that spread out into the Imperium. But they already had that culture of family before all else. So,
but I mean, that is a very small standard to put your hat on, I guess. Compared, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying compared to the other two that we were just talking about. I mean, like for instance, the White Scars there is the culture, anyways, of understanding how to work calligraphy, the hunt, the riding of horseback, the aspects of humor. This is all things, anyways, that are very centrifugal to just the White Scars.
Right. And that's
as opposed to salamanders, where it's just family. Which that's not a bad. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, anyways, that culturally that is fairly small compared to what we were just talking about. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay.
I have one question for you before we wrap up. Is if people learned, if more information was out about the Khan earlier than about the White Scars, do you think people's viewpoints on the White Scars would be significantly different?
No. And here's the reason why is because I think that you find other you can find the same history with other chapters. Like, for instance, the Raven Guard. A lot of people don't really like the Raven Guard. They like the aspects of the Raven Guard, especially because of Corvus Corvax, who, by the way, I think is also a pretty cool Primarch. But just that concept of they're the sneaky ones, they developed into a singular aspect. And this is the problem, I think, with a lot of the original 18 Space Marines, is that they all kind of develop into a very singular aspect. And the research and the history on them, anyways, isn't very well known. It's just normally when you think of, I mean, we talked about a couple of them, anyways, even ones that have a lot of culture behind them. Like, when people think of Space Wolves, what do they think? Space Vikings. Or the Salamanders. Oh, they're the ones that care. Or the Blood Angels. They're the ones that have the vampire thing, right? You know, I mean, they all kind of, or the Ultramarines, they're there. And then they kind of get funneled into these just singular aspects. So I think the people that really look into them, I think they fairly enjoy a lot of the culture that these different Space Marines are, but they all kind of funnel into the same concept. They're Space Marines.
Do you think part of that singularism comes from the fact that the Emperor chose them for particular roles, and because of that, those particular roles are shown through the units?
It's a good question.
Well, that's something that we can discuss later.
Well, no, I can answer it. It's just, I think there's a lot of that there. What you just said, anyways. I think a lot of that there, anyways, is very correct. But at the same time, okay, I know, anyways, Yuksen, you like to kick the Emperor around. Or chronicling. It's always, anyways, it's the Emperor's fault. Kick. You know? This is, I think, one of the problems that the Emperor always had, anyways. And I think we also discussed this a little bit, is that while he is working for humanity, he has lost his humanity. So the concept of these guys, he's looking at the Space Marines as tools, which are very expendable.
Right.
So as opposed to the concept that these people had lives before they became Space Marines, and then after they became Space Marines, they still have that human characteristic. I mean, yes, a lot of it has been kicked out of them through genetic, enhancement and their soul sworn duty to duty. But I think that he missed the point that they're still human. So they still, of course, anyways, they have their traditions. They have their, and I think the Primarchs figured that out. At least the good Primarchs kind of, or the Primarchs that did well with their armies figured that out fairly early. Like, for instance, like I said, with Jagatai, he knew these guys were kind of buccaneers, freewheeling, motorbike riding, navigators, and he's just like, well, we'll just use that instead of what the Emperor did, and he's just like, go forth.
Right.
The Emperor, I think a lot of people agree with me on this, anyways, is that, and I think you do too. The Emperor has lost his humanity somewhere along the lines before the Unification Wars. He still wants humanity to be great. He still fights for humanity, but the concept of what humanity is, he has lost that long ago. And
it's almost at this point of, I want to make sure this succeeds. I don't really why anymore that I do, but I want to succeed.
Yes, a lot of that. But it's more than that. It's the concept of he's starting, and every general does this, by the way, because you have to, because men will die. So the concept, anyways, that you move forces around, you're having them strike particular places. You cannot be friends with everybody that is underneath you. Why? Well, a lot of them are going to die. And for you have to remove the emotion of what you're doing when you're a general. It's that simple. You need to look at the leadership aspect of this and the goals that you need to obtain. and you need to remove the emotion from it. And he did that a long time ago. And now, anyways, I think, anyways, this kind of, like you said, anyways, this kind of comes through in history, anyways, is that everybody just kind of looks at this, anyways, the same way the Emperor did. So it's like Raven Guard. They're the sneaky ones. They're the ones who use the jump packs. Space Wolves. They're my executioners. They're the Space Vikings. The White Scars. They're the guys of the bikes. I mean,
Alpha Legion. What? They don't exist. What are you talking about?
Alpha Legion. I don't know about that one. I made that one at the very end, and it's
or the very beginning.
Or the very beginning. Yeah, it was a science experiment. But
that's why I called them the Ghost Legion originally.
Which, by the way, gives kind of an interesting concept as to, and this is my last point, and then we do have to leave. But Horus Lupercal, he's the only guy, anyways, that spent an extended period of time with the Emperor for all the rest of them. And we see part of the Emperor's humanity come back with Horus. He starts to like him. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What's that?
Before he goes, here, have fun. Well, enjoy your life. Bye.
No, he starts to like him. There's this friendship. There is this very much father and son thing. And then, like you just mentioned, anyways, it gets to the very end, anyways, the Great Crusade, the Ulanor campaign. And he says, I'm putting my favorite son in charge because I'm leaving. I'm going back to Terra. And his most fatal mistake is, instead of trusting his son, who he has become friends with and enjoys his time anyways, he reverts back to this inhuman thing and goes, well, I trust you to lead the Imperium of Man, but I don't trust you. And then he leaves. I mean, okay, so I got a question for you, actually, before we leave. If he had actually told Horus Lupercal what he was planning on doing, the whole concept of why he was leaving. Remember, it was because of the Golden Throne and the Webway project, right? If he had actually told Horus Lupercal, anyways, this is why I need to leave, because this will actually separate us from the heredities of the warp. Of course, he would also have to explain what the warp is at that point, because he kept that a secret too. But if he explained all of this to Horus, and he said, I'm leaving you in charge because you are the only person that I explicitly trust to do this without me, do you think the Horus heresy would have actually taken place?
No, because one of the main driving factors behind Horus falling to chaos is the fact that he felt doubt because he was betrayed, and because he felt that even though the Emperor claimed that he trusted him, he didn't really fall through and say, yeah, I trust you enough.
Yeah. Which, speaking as a son myself, anyways, that is a horrible thing to hear from a dad. Mind you, anyways, he could have left it so many different ways. He could have even just said, anyways, I will tell you later. Just trust me right now.
Right.
It could have been even that simple, and Horus probably would have been fine with it. But just straight up, I'm leaving.
Peace out.
Yeah. It's just, well, I know we got away from the White Scars at the very end there, anyways. But I think you will agree with me, Yuksen, that the White Scars are actually a fairly interesting and very cultural aspect, anyways, of the Imperium.
Well, they're awesome.
Yes. And they ride motorcycles, which is great. But,
folks, and smile.
Yes, they have a sense of humor. Well, folks, that's the end for this week. Join us next month as we talk about probably one of the things that both Yuksen and I hate the most. The Inquisition.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this vlog.
Yuksen, is it really fantastic? We're going to be talking about the Inquisition.
Well, I like some aspects of it. The majority, no, but there's a couple things here and there.
I'm going to make you talk about the Hereticus. And we'll see how you feel about that.
But anyways, feel free to like, follow, subscribe, and comment. And don't forget to check out the shop. We got some cool stuff there, like pillows and hats.
No, and don't forget rabbits, Yuksen.
Right. Don't forget the rabbits.
Have a great day. And as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar.
And Yuksen.
Signing off.